Psalm 22, verse 1-2, opens with one of the most profound expressions of spiritual anguish found anywhere in Scripture. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me, and from the words of my roaring? O my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not, and in the night season, and am not silent. The opening cry, my God, reveals the psalmist's continued faith even in desperate circumstances. Despite feeling abandoned, David still claims God as his own. The repetition emphasizes both urgency and personal relationship. This double address appears nowhere else in the Psalms, marking this moment as very intense. The word forsaken means to leave or abandon. Yet the psalmist does not accuse God of permanent rejection, but questions the reason for this apparent separation. This verse gained ultimate significance when Jesus quoted it from the cross. Matthew 27:46 notes, "And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? The phrase, so far from helping me, describes God's apparent distance during a crisis. The Hebrew word for helping suggests deliverance or salvation. When believers face overwhelming trials, God sometimes seems absent, despite their desperate need for intervention. The words of my roaring uses language typically applied to lions. This animalistic imagery conveys primal anguish that transcends normal human expression. Verse 2 intensifies the complaint by describing persistent, unanswered prayer. I cry in the daytime suggests continuous pleading during waking hours. The word for cry reveals loud, desperate calling rather than quiet petition. Lamentations 3:8 describes similar frustration. Also, when I cry and shout, he shutteth out my prayer. But thou hearest not expresses the painful silence that follows fervent prayer. The psalmist does not question God's ability to hear, but his willingness to respond. This perceived divine silence creates additional suffering beyond the original crisis. In the night season, extends the time frame to include sleepless hours of distress. Night often represents times of vulnerability and fear. Psalm 6:6 describes similar nocturnal anguish. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. And am not silent reveals persistent prayer despite apparent futility. The psalmist refuses to stop calling upon God even when receiving no response. This reveals remarkable faith that continues seeking God despite discouraging circumstances. These verses validate the reality of spiritual struggle within genuine faith. Believers sometimes experience seasons when God seems distant or unresponsive to prayer. Such experiences do not mean a lack of faith. The Psalm's prophetic dimension points to Christ's ultimate suffering on behalf of humanity. When Jesus quoted these words, he referred people to Psalm 22, which prophesied the events that were happening to Jesus on the cross. For contemporary believers, these verses provide language for honest expression during hard times. When facing unanswered prayer or apparent divine silence, believers can find comfort knowing that even Christ experienced such moments. The cross reveals that God's apparent absence does not mean his actual abandonment of his people.